You're bored, and clicking through YouTube and everything is dull. Nobody can hold your interest, and it all starts to look gray. Everyone is boring, and it's all gray, gray, gray. But then, a YouTube twister hits, and you're swirled around to a show talking about The Wizard of Oz. Not just the Judy Garland movie, but the original book, and you find yourself in a world of color and magic. Welcome to Oz, my friends. I'm Rose, the neutral good witch of the Northeast, and this is my land, rose-colored movies. Today I'm talking about Oz, comparing the L. Frank Baum book The Wizard of Oz to the famous 1939 movie. And just for fun, I'll talk about the movie The Wiz, because it turns out that is much closer to the book than the other movie. For most people, including myself, their only point of reference for The Wizard of Oz was the MGM movie. The book was mostly out of circulation by the time I was a kid, and by now it's practically history. But maybe it's time to dust off the Oz books and give them a second chance. Prepare yourself, because Oz is not quite what you think it is. Oz is bigger, and more interesting, and more complicated. The story begins with the endless gray plains of Kansas, where the harsh sun has drained all color from the land and the people. The paint on the farmhouse has faded to gray, the dirt in the grass is gray, and the people have turned gray themselves. Dorothy is there with her Uncle Henry, Aunt Em, and her little black dog Toto. A storm rolls in, the kind you get in the plains, where tornadoes form. Aunt Em and Uncle Henry make it to the storm cellar, but Dorothy is chasing Toto and is caught up in the house when it is picked up by the cyclone and carried away. It travels so smoothly that Dorothy eventually lays down and falls asleep in her bed. She wakes up with a jolt as her house lands. When she opens the door, she is no longer in Kansas. Outside is a lush green paradise filled with flowers and birds, and coming towards her is a group of little people dressed in blue, and a little old witch wearing white. Dorothy is greeted as a sorceress and thanked for killing the Wicked Witch of the East with her house. Dorothy doesn't know what they're talking about, and they show her the feet of the Wicked Witch sticking out from under her house. The witch in white introduces herself as the Good Witch of the North, and Dorothy asks how she can get back to Kansas. The witch doesn't know, as the land they're in, Oz, is bounded on all sides by an impassable desert. The witch asks her hat, which tells Dorothy to go to the Emerald City. Dorothy asks how to get to the Emerald City, and the witch tells her to follow the yellow brick road. The witch then kisses Dorothy's forehead, imbuing her protection on her, and gives her the silver shoes from the squished witch. Dorothy sets out on the yellow brick road towards the Emerald City with a basket filled with bread, some fruit, water, and her dog Toto. After a while she stops to rest, and is greeted by a scarecrow on a pole in the field by the road. On his request, she pulls him down from the pole and tells him she's on her way to the Emerald City to see the wizard. He asks to go with her to ask Oz for some brains, as he is only stuffed with straw. She says she understands, and he joins them on their trip. Later, the yellow brick road passes into a dark forest and starts to fall apart. They stop for the night in an abandoned cottage, and in the morning, when Dorothy is getting some water from a stream, she hears a groan from the woods. They go to investigate and find a man made of tin rusted in place in the process of chopping down a tree. He asks Dorothy to retrieve the oil can from his cottage and oil his hinges so he can move again. When he hears of their trip to see the wizard, he wonders if the wizard can grant him a heart, and asks to join their group. On the way, he tells them how he came to be a tin man. He says that he had once been a woodsman, and had fallen in love with a girl. The girl lived with an old woman who didn't want to lose her, so the old woman went to the Wicked Witch of the East and asked for a curse. The witch cursed the woodsman's axe to chop off his own leg. The woodsman replaced it with a new leg made of tin, but then the axe chopped off his other leg, and then his arms. He had these replaced as well, but then his axe chopped off his head, and cut straight through his body. The head and the torso were replaced, but he no longer had a heart with which to love the girl. When the scarecrow says that he would still rather have brains than a heart, the Tin Man says, "I shall take the heart, for brains do not make one happy, and happiness is the best thing in the world." They're walking along a now overgrown yellow brick road when a lion leaps out of the forest and knocks over the scarecrow and the Tin Man. Toto starts barking at him, and when the lion prepares to pounce on Toto, Dorothy rushes in and hits the lion on the nose, admonishing him for attacking a small dog. The lion stops and tries to defend himself, saying that he didn't bite Toto. Dorothy calls him a big coward, and he agrees. He explains that everyone expects him to be brave since he is the king of beasts, but that he has always been afraid. He says that he normally just roars and people and animals run away. On hearing about their quest, the lion asks to join so that he can ask the wizard for some courage. They set out again, but come to a vast chasm that's too wide to jump over. The Scarecrow sees a large tree and suggests the Tin Man cut it down so that it falls across the gap as a bridge. They're doing so when they're attacked by two Kalidas, great beasts with the heads of tigers and the bodies of bears. They run across the bridge, and the lion stands in front of Dorothy, vowing to hold back the Kalidas, when the Scarecrow has an idea and tells the Tin Man to cut their end of the bridge while the Kalidas are on it. The Tin Man does, and the two Kalidas fall to their doom in the chasm. They make their way out of the forest and find that their path is cut off by a huge river, and the Scarecrow suggests that the Tin Man cut them wood to make a raft. This he does, and they make their way across the river, drifting somewhat downstream. When they make their way to the opposite bank, the land around them is filled with poppies, whose scent puts Dorothy, the lion, and Toto into a deep sleep. The Scarecrow and the Tin Man are unaffected, however, and manage to carry Dorothy and Toto free of the poppies. They're resting when they see a wildcat chasing a mouse, and the Tin Man decides to save the mouse by beheading the wildcat. The mouse they saved wasn't just any mouse, but the queen of the field mice, and in exchange for being saved, agrees to help save the lion, who is still trapped sleeping in the field of poppies. The Tin Man builds a cart, and they put the lion up onto its bed, and the queen of the field mice calls a huge group of mice to pull ropes, and they pull the lion out of the field of poppies. Altogether again, the group sets back out on the yellow brick road, and they reach the gatehouse of the Emerald City. Here, they are all required to put on green glasses to protect them from the glare of the city, and they go to meet the wizard. Everything in the Emerald City is green, and the city is encrusted with glittering gems. They go to the palace and ask to see the wizard. The wizard agrees to see each of them separately, and he appears in a different form to each of them. The wizard sees Dorothy first, and he is in the shape of a huge head. She asks if he can send her home back to Kansas, and he tells her that he will only help her if she will go and kill the Wicked Witch of the West. Dorothy says she can't kill anything, but the wizard says that she has already killed the Wicked Witch of the East, and that she wears the silver slippers, and bears the mark of protection from the Good Witch of the North. Distressed, Dorothy leaves. The Scarecrow meets the wizard next, who appears this time as a beautiful lady. When the Scarecrow asks for brains, the Scarecrow is told that he must kill the Wicked Witch of the West. The Tin Man meets the wizard in the guise of a huge beast, and is given the same condition. Finally, the lion meets the wizard, who is now a giant ball of flame, and is also told he must kill the witch to receive help from the wizard. And so, not really sure what else to do, the four resolve to set off to the land of the Winkies, where the Wicked Witch of the West rules. They leave the Emerald City, and when their green glasses are removed at the gate, Dorothy is surprised to find that her new green dress is actually white. They leave, going west. The Wicked Witch sees them coming, and sends a pack of 40 wolves to kill them, but the Tin Man meets them with his axe and chops off their heads. The witch then sends 40 crows, but the Scarecrow sets himself standing above the others so the crows attack him, and then he catches them all and wrings their necks. Then the witch sends a bunch of bees, but the group hides themselves under straw from the Scarecrow, and the bees attack the Tin Man, losing their stingers against his metal sides and dying in the attack. Finally, she sends a dozen Winkies with spears to go attack them, but the lion roars, scaring them all, and they run away. Finally, she resorts to using a magic cap that summons the flying monkeys. The cap can only be used 3 times, and she has already used it twice, once to take the land of the Winkies, and once to fight the Wizard of Oz. But she uses it this last time to tell the monkeys to kill them all except the lion, who she wants to harness like a horse. The monkeys seize the Tin Man and drop him on sharp rocks, leaving him dented and abandoned. They pull the stuffing out of the Scarecrow and throw his clothing in a tree. Then they bind the lion and carry him away to the witch's castle. But when they get to Dorothy, they find that she carries the protection of the Good Witch of the North, and they refuse to harm her, instead carrying her carefully to the Wicked Witch and leaving her there. The Wicked Witch of the West also finds that Dorothy is protected by the Good Witch of the North and the Silver Slippers, and realizes she can't harm Dorothy. The witch also sees that Dorothy doesn't understand the power in her shoes, so the witch sets Dorothy to work in her kitchens. The witch desperately wants Dorothy's shoes, however, but can't touch Dorothy. Instead, she sets an invisible bar on the kitchen floor to trip Dorothy, and it knocks off one of her shoes. The witch grabs it and gloats that she will someday get the other one. Dorothy gets so mad she picks up a bucket of water and dumps it on the witch. This melts the witch like brown sugar, and Dorothy apologizes while watching the witch melt in front of her. Dorothy takes up her lost shoe and goes to free the lion. The Winkies are celebrating that Dorothy has freed them from the tyranny of the Wicked Witch, and they help her to find and fix up the Tin Man and the Scarecrow. Together they spend a few days in the yellow castle of the Winkies, who ask the Tin Man if he would like to be their ruler, but they all agree to go back to the Wizard of Oz to claim their promised rewards. Before she leaves, Dorothy finds the magic golden cap in the witch's closet and takes it, not knowing what it does but thinking it was pretty. They set out, but without a road to follow, they get very lost. Eventually, they call the field mice to ask for directions. The Mouse Queen shows up and tells them that they are far off track, but says Dorothy should just use the cap to call up the flying monkeys, who can fly them all to the Emerald City in an hour. The Queen shows Dorothy the charm written inside the cap, which Dorothy recites. The flying monkeys appear, and they fly the whole group to the Emerald City. On the way, the monkeys tell Dorothy the story of how they came to be trapped by the spell of the cap, how their ancestor had angered a sorceress and been bound to the cap. The four of them go to see the wizard again, and when he tries to dither and ask for more time, they get frustrated, and the lion roars. This scares Toto, who knocks over a screen to the side, exposing a little old man. The little old man explains that he is the Wizard of Oz, and it created all the illusions they'd seen of him before. The Scarecrow calls him a humbug, a charlatan, and he agrees, saying that he is a humbug. He explains that he had been a circus balloonist in Omaha when his balloon was blown away and landed in Oz. The people there thought he was a wizard, and because of this, they did what he told them to do. He had them build a city and wear green glasses so that everything in the city looked green. To their requests, he fills the Scarecrow's head with bran and needles so that he is sharp. For the Tin Man, he cuts a window in the side of the torso and hangs a little heart-shaped silk cushion inside, and he gives the lion a drink of a green potion, liquid courage. Each of them feels that they have now gotten what they wanted, though the wizard tells the Scarecrow that experience is the true source of knowledge, the Tin Man that a heart leads to unhappiness, and the lion that true courage is facing danger even when you are afraid. For Dorothy, the wizard proposes to make a new balloon and take her out of Oz the way he came in. They build a huge green silk balloon and attach a clothes basket to the bottom. They fill the balloon with hot air, and Oz gets in. He says his goodbyes to the people of Oz, telling them that the Scarecrow will take over in his place. Dorothy is running after Toto, who ran off to chase a cat, when the balloon breaks its tether and leaves without her. Dorothy calls after the wizard, but he can't come back. Dorothy is destitute in the days following the wizard's departure, until the Scarecrow suggests she use the golden cap to have the flying monkeys take her back to Kansas. This seems like a good idea, so she summons them, but they tell her that they are bound to the land of Oz and cannot leave its borders or cross the desert that surrounds it. He leaves, and the group is once again stumped. They call in the Ozian Castle guard to ask his advice, and he suggests that Glinda the Good Witch in the south might know how to get Dorothy home, as she is the most powerful of the witches. She lives due south in the land of the Quadlings. He tells them that the road south is perilous, however, filled with dangerous beasts who attack travelers. But the Scarecrow resolves that they must take Dorothy south to see Glinda. The four set off on the road to the south until it reaches woods where the trees grab the Scarecrow and attack them. The Tin Man hacks at the tree limbs with his axe, and the trees back off, leaving them alone. They then come to a land of small porcelain people, and make their way carefully through the land of knick-knack china people, trying not to break anyone but knocking over a small church. They go farther and find a gathering of many wild beasts in a wood. They proclaim the lion the king of the beasts and ask for help with a huge monster, an enormous spider who has been eating them. If the lion will defeat the huge spider, the other animals agree to take the lion as their own king. The lion happens to find the giant spider asleep and leaps onto its back. Seeing that the spider's head is attached with the thinnest of necks, the lion knocks the spider's head right off with his claws. The other animals of the forest rejoice, and all proclaim the lion their king. They go on through the forest until they reach a huge hill covered with rocks. When they try to pass, the rocks reach out on long necks and punch them back. Not seeing any other way to get past the hammerheads, Dorothy calls up the flying monkeys and uses her third and final request to have them fly them to Glinda's castle. The Quadling country to the south is decorated all in red, and they finally meet Glinda the Good Witch in her castle. She is very beautiful, with red hair and blue eyes, and wears a white dress. Dorothy tells Glinda her whole story, and how she just wishes to get back to Kansas. Glinda tells Dorothy she will tell her how to get back to Kansas in exchange for the golden cap. Dorothy agrees happily, since her 3 requests have been used up. Glinda then explains that the silver shoes can take Dorothy anywhere she wants by just clicking the heels together 3 times and saying where she wants to go. Dorothy says her goodbyes to the lion, the Scarecrow, and the Tin Man, clicks her heels 3 times, and asks to be taken back to her home in Kansas. Glinda then uses the cap to have the flying monkeys take the Scarecrow to the Emerald City, the Tin Man to the Winkies, and the lion to the forest, where they can each rule their own kingdoms, and then Glinda returns the cap to the monkeys themselves, so that they will no longer be beholden to anyone by its power. Dorothy finds herself back home on the Kansas prairie, in front of a new farmhouse that had been built after the old one was carried away. Dorothy runs to greet Aunt Em, and the book ends with her saying, "It's good to be home." And that is the end of The Wizard of Oz, the first in a series of 14 Oz books written by L. Frank Baum. There was a time when everybody read the Oz books. They were the gold standard for children's literature from 1900 until 1950 or so. I really liked the book, and I think I'm going to read some of the sequels. As an adult, I can appreciate the philosophical debate between the Scarecrow and the Tin Man over whether intellect is better than emotion. And I really like how the characters all possess the thing that they're looking for. The Scarecrow solves problems, the Tin Man has passion, and the Lion shows tremendous courage. The story is not quite what you expect if you've only seen the movie. They used to show the classic Wizard of Oz movie on TV all the time here in the States. Watching it again, I realized that I have already watched this movie far more times than I'd like. It's a great movie, but I got way too much of it as a kid. I read that it's the most watched movie of all time, and I certainly feel like a few of those were just me. The movie sticks fairly close to the book, with some notable exceptions. If you were yelling at your computer that the silver slippers should be ruby, that's something that was changed just for the movie. Ruby slippers looked better than silver against the yellow brick road and against the green of the Emerald City. The 1939 movie also uses a framing device that turns the entire episode in Oz into a dream, since they didn't think an audience could stomach a true fantasy adventure. So the movie opens in sepia tone with all the people Dorothy meets in Oz as people around her farm. The Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion are all farm hands, and the Wicked Witch is a rich woman who is determined to have Toto put down for biting her leg. Dorothy is all set to run away with Toto, but she meets a carnival huckster who convinces her that her aunt is sick with worry over Dorothy leaving, and Dorothy rushes back to the farm. A huge storm blows in, and everyone has gone to the storm cellar, but Dorothy is too late. She goes inside, a window comes loose and hits her head, and she passes out. When Dorothy wakes up, she opens the door and finds herself in color and in the land of Oz. She meets Glinda, who here is the Good Witch of the North, who explains that Dorothy's house killed the Wicked Witch of the East. The Munchkins come out and thank Dorothy and sing a song. The Wicked Witch of the West pops in and demands the ruby slippers, but Glinda has since placed them on Dorothy. The Wicked Witch vows to get the slippers and then leaves in smoke. Dorothy is told to follow the yellow brick road to go meet up with the Wizard of Oz, who can help her return home. On the road, Dorothy picks up the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion in scenes fairly true to the book, and they make their way towards the Emerald City. They leave the forest and run into the field of poppies, which the Wicked Witch cursed with a sleeping spell, and Dorothy and the Lion fall asleep. Glinda the Good Witch in turn sends a snowstorm, which blocks the effect of the poppies and wakes them up, and they all go on to the Emerald City. There they meet up with a wizard, who appears as a huge floating head, and he tells them that he will help them with their requests, but in turn they must bring back the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West. When the Scarecrow says they'd have to kill her to get it, the wizard doesn't answer. They head off towards the witch, but she sees them coming and sends her legions of flying monkeys to go get Dorothy. The flying monkeys take Dorothy and Toto up to the Wicked Witch's tower. The witch tells Dorothy that she'll kill Toto unless Dorothy gives her the ruby slippers. Dorothy readily agrees to hand them over, but when the witch tries to take the shoes, she gets zapped. The witch tells Dorothy the shoes can't be removed unless Dorothy is dead, and she tells Dorothy she'll kill her when an hourglass has run out, and then leaves. Toto escapes, finds the others, and leads them up into the castle. They free Dorothy, and they're chased by the witch and the Winky guards into the kitchen, where they're pinned in a corner. The witch sets fire to the Scarecrow, and Dorothy picks up a bucket of water to put it out, and hits the witch as well, which melts the Wicked Witch. The Winkies thank her for getting rid of the witch, and the four go back to claim their rewards from the wizard. The wizard stalls, telling them to come back the next day, when Toto runs to the corner and pulls the curtain open on an operating station for the wizard. They find that the wizard is actually an old circus performer, but he still tries to fulfill his pledge, and gives the Scarecrow a diploma, the Tin Man a pocket watch heart, and the Lion a Medal of Honor. He plans to take Dorothy back in the balloon he was blown in on, but Toto runs off at the last second, and Dorothy misses the balloon. While Dorothy is crying, Glinda the Good Witch comes down in her bubble and explains to Dorothy that she has had the power to go back on her own the whole time, but had to truly want to go back. She has to click her heels together 3 times and wish to go home. Dorothy says her goodbyes, clicks her heels, and wakes up in bed in her home in Kansas, with Auntie Em and Uncle Henry sitting by her along with the farmhands. She tells them she's had the most amazing dream and that they were all there. The movie ends with Dorothy saying, "There's no place like home." The 1939 Wizard of Oz movie is pretty much perfect. It's gorgeous, and Judy Garland is amazing. Between her voice, her deep brown eyes, and her total conviction as Dorothy, hers is one of the few faultless performances in film. Somewhere Over the Rainbow has become her acknowledged signature song. The movie mostly stuck to the book, even keeping the essential transition from a world of gray to a world of color, but the film framed it such that everything in Oz had been a dream. While it was done really well, it's still kind of a cheap device. If it's all just a dream, then there's no possibility of anyone else going there, or of Dorothy going back. There's no such place as Oz then. It literally destroys the land. The movie also has Dorothy keen on running away from home, where in the book, Dorothy is a calm, collected kid who's really just trying to get back to Kansas. The other changes are mostly small. The silver shoes becoming Ruby, and Glinda becomes the Good Witch of the North instead of the South. The flying monkeys become the shock troops of the Wicked Witch, instead of the magical Uber of Oz. And the whole land of the South is left out, though it didn't really add much to the story. The 1939 Wizard of Oz was a great movie, but it's also a bit dated. When they used to show it on TV, I think I built up a tolerance to the cheese in the movie, and watching it again after a break, the musical numbers are honestly kind of grating. I solidly do not like the Munchkin song now. So for book versus movie, I'm really surprised to say this, but I like the book better. I went into this thinking the whole thing would just be a glowing recommendation for the movie, but I'm just not into it anymore. Maybe it was better when I was a kid. Side notes. Just for fun, I rewatched The Wiz from 1978, which was based on the 1975 Broadway show, and I realized that I liked that movie a whole lot more than I thought I did. It's another musical take on The Wizard of Oz, just with black people, and it's set in New York City. And The Wiz is actually closer to the book than the 1939 film. It stars Diana Ross as Dorothy, and Michael Jackson as the Scarecrow. And darn, but I really like Michael Jackson's Scarecrow. He's under a fair bit of makeup, including a nose like a peanut butter cup wrapper. This version of the Scarecrow is stuffed with shredded paper, and he quotes from stuff he's read on the paper shreds all the time. Stuff like Cicero and Shakespeare. I love this. It's a really clever take on the idea from the book that the Scarecrow is the tactical thinker of the group. He wants a brain, but doesn't understand that he already knows a lot. When Dorothy blows in, she is met by the Good Witch of the North, who is not Glinda this time. And the shoes from the Bad Witch are silver slippers. It's a fun movie, more fun than I remember. In another note, I'd always heard that Shirley Temple had been turned down to play Dorothy, but I read that she had never been in serious consideration for the part, because she was under contract at Fox, and Fox would not loan her to other studios. The movie producers had wanted Judy Garland for the role very early because of her singing voice. Shirley Temple was a decent young actress, but her singing was never all that great. Inspired by the success of Wizard of Oz, Fox instead fast-tracked a fantasy starring Shirley Temple called The Bluebird, which was released in 1940. There's a common misconception that The Wizard of Oz was the first movie in color, but that's not true. Disney had started using Technicolor for their films in 1932, most notably with Snow White in 1937. But the first live-action film that was entirely done in Technicolor was Becky Sharp in 1935, 4 years before The Wizard of Oz. So while it feels like it should have been the first, with the scene where Dorothy opens the door to the Technicolor land of Oz, sadly it was not. Also, there was a scene that was cut out of the movie, a dance number for the Jitterbug. It happens when Dorothy and the crew are heading towards the Wicked Witch's castle and end up in the creepy forest. Just before Dorothy is picked up by the flying monkeys, they were all bit by jitterbugs sent by the Wicked Witch, and started dancing a jitterbug. The song is cute and kind of catchy, but it was taken out because they thought the dance fad was probably going to die out before the movie did, and they were right. Also, the colors in the Land of Oz in the book correspond to the color wheel. So Dorothy lands in the blue Munchkin land of the East, travels to the center in Emerald City, and goes west to the yellow country of the Winkies. Then she heads south to the red Gillikin country of Glinda. I hadn't really thought about it, but Oz is a thoroughly American fairy tale. Dorothy Gale from Kansas is the quintessential American girl, plucky, sweet, and determined. She comes from a poor farm on a gray prairie, and yet her only wish is to be returned to her home and her family. Britain has Alice, Italy Pinocchio, and Denmark can claim The Little Mermaid, but the US has Dorothy in the Land of Oz. Finally, if you want to see a really memorable version of Judy Garland singing Over the Rainbow, there was a 1955 television special she did where she closed out the show dressed as a hobo and sang the song in the saddest way possible. It's on YouTube and it will crush you. Thanks for listening. This is Rose with Rose-Colored Movies.